Yep. All right. So, Seth, for you in the airline issues, are they near the inherent value, or is there any such thing with airline stock?
Yeah, it's I was saying to a friend last night that having covered this industry in my case for 15 years and really watched it my whole life, up until recently, it always seemed like things never ended up being as bad as they seemed at first. I mean, I could name countless crises over the years where we worried a lot and then it just wasn't that bad. And then these past 2 years, we've had two things that turned out to be worse than we ever imagined, right? The MAX grounding. And now this obviously eclipses that in terms of total damage. I remember Andrew asked me a couple weeks ago, where do you go? And a month ago, people were looking at with airlines, where's the exposure, who's flying to China, all that. I mean, now it's clearly just a flight to, who can survive this, who has the best balance sheet. Delta, Southwest, the two sort of investment-grade airlines in this country. But yeah, at this point, hey, you tell me what's going to happen with the virus, and I'll tell you the rest of it, right? Because we're looking at such granular things when the biggest variable of all, none of us know what's going to happen.
Hey, guys, just a couple of points. First of all, Carnival shares have been halted, the cruise line shares for Carnival. They're citing news pending, so we'll see what happens with that. Before it was halted, the stock was down by almost well, right now you're looking at United Airlines, which is still trading. It's down about 16%. Carnival shares were down by almost 16% before they were halted as well. I also want to tell you, I've been going back and forth with Doug Cass, who was at the airport last night to meet a passenger who was coming off that JetBlue flight that came from New York down to Palm Beach, where they had a case of a confirmed coronavirus for one of the passengers on board. He confirms what we heard from that other passenger, Mr. Rodman, earlier today, that they were told by the doctor they didn't need to self-quarantine or change routine, but they were told apparently by an airport executives that maybe there should be a 14-day self-quarantine, so the confusion that goes on with that. But Seth, if what we've heard to this point is correct, if that's a passenger who got on the plane knowing he'd been tested 2 days before, got the positive confirmation of that test while he was on it, again, that's based on what we've heard from a passenger who was sitting near him on the plane. If that's the case, it just raises all sorts of questions for not only JetBlue, but also all of the airlines about what they should be doing at this point. A lot of people right now can't get a refund for tickets that they'd purchased previously, but this seems like it would put a huge sort of risk factor for any of the airlines out there. What do you think?
It does. And Delta a few days ago was the first airline to come out and say it doesn't matter when you bought the ticket, we'll give you a refund. Southwest never charges change. I should say not a refund, a credit for future travel. Yeah. Southwest always does that. But yeah, at this point, exactly. And that really surprises me if in fact nobody is under any kind of precautions right now. I mean, it would have something to do with proximity to the person, right? It's not just the fact that you're on an airplane necessarily with them.
Not necessarily. I mean, if the passenger got up and used the bathroom, could have touched
well, exactly, right. That's what you would.
If there was service where the flight attendant was serving, and all the airlines have said they're being very careful, they're wearing gloves. But if you're serving one passenger and then another passenger across the aisle.
Sure, anything No, absolutely, and that's what I was going to say. It's just not particular to an airplane. It's any situation like that, right? If you were in a movie theater full of those same people,
right.
You would want to see that right. So we know it's not airborne. We know you're not going to get it because the person 15 rows behind you sneezes. But if they touch something and all the rest of it, so that really does surprise me. Becky, I was thinking earlier about how I was in the room in late 2017 when Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines, made this comment that you probably remember. He said, U.S. airlines are never again going to lose money. And I remember, I remember just kind of looking at other journalists and analysts in the room and just sort of thinking, and airlines were about as strong as they'd ever been, but thinking, are you sure you want to make that statement? That's pretty brave.
Right.
Yeah, that's not nearly as good as the Valentine's Day gift to climate change from Ed Bastian. That's much more recent, and we'll see how that $1 billion over 10 years. We'll see how that plays out, whether they still plant all those trees down in Africa.
Yeah, and look, and these airlines so far haven't taken all the steps that they would have taken if this were right after 9/11 and they were just struggling to get through the day, right? When you see, a hiring freeze, some voluntary leave, keep your benefits and some of your pay and all that. And look, if you could assure them that this is going to be a 2, 3, 4 month issue, that would all be absolutely correct. You don't want to squander years of in some of the case, for some of these airlines anyway, goodwill that you've built up with your employees as you head into new labor negotiations and all that. But you know, they haven't furloughed anybody. I mean, after 9/11, it was just days before airlines were, you know, in some cases cutting, I think it was 20% of their workforces. And here we have something where potentially so much worse than 9/11 in the sense that with 9/11. You know, once it passed, I mean, I was flying around, you know, on cheap airline tickets and empty flights, saying to myself, I know I'm the safest I've ever been. You can't assure people of that now. So when you see flights now with, I talked to one friend who was on a flight the other day, 8 people on it, you know, the difference here is that, you know, when does this end? Sure, there's a scenario. We hear about those green shoots, so to speak, in China where domestic travel apparently recovering as the numbers of the virus itself, the virus statistics themselves perhaps get better, as you said, who knows, right? So there's a scenario where this stabilizes in some way. It's not eradicated, but a couple months ago, people feel okay traveling again. That could happen. But it's just complete lack of certainty and lack of precedent, even going back to 9/11, where you kind of knew on some level that day was the worst day. Now who knows?
Okay. All right, gentlemen. Thank you. We appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon. An unprecedented development in the sports